The phantom zone screamed as reality tore itself apart. General Zod felt the dimensional walls collapse around him, not into the familiar space of his native universe, but somewhere else, somewhere wrong. The breach hurled him through layers of existence that should not touch, cosmic membranes rupturing like tissue paper before Kryptonian might. Then yellow sunlight hit his cells, and power flooded through him like liquid fire. His eyes snapped open as he crashed through the atmosphere of an Earth, leaving a contrail of superheated air across a clear morning sky. He struck the ground in the middle of Times Square at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, creating a crater 15 feet deep and shattering windows for 3 blocks. The impact would have vaporized a human. Zod simply stood, black armor smoking, and surveyed his surroundings with the tactical assessment of a military commander who had conquered a dozen worlds before this primitive planet's ancestors learned to make fire. Humans scattered, screaming. Predictable. Zod's enhanced hearing picked up thousands of heartbeats accelerating in terror, phones capturing video, someone shouting about calling the police. His X-ray vision swept the buildings surrounding him, cataloging structural weaknesses, analyzing the technology level, searching for threats. Primitive, perhaps early 21st century by this planet's standards. No energy weapons, no force fields, no orbital defense platforms. Then his gaze locked onto the massive digital billboards, and Zod's tactical mind paused. Every screen showed the same thing: humans in colorful costumes, capes, masks. Heroes by the propaganda plastered across advertisements. The Seven saving America. A blonde man in blue with a cape, heat vision glowing red in his eyes, arms crossed in a pose of supreme confidence. Another man in black armor, dark and brooding. A woman with a tiara and ancient-looking armor. But Zod's enhanced senses detected no Kryptonian energy signatures, no Speed Force distortions, no magical resonance from the woman's costume. These were not the Justice League he had faced countless times in his own universe. "Holy shit, is that another soup?" Someone shouted from behind a taxi. Another soup. The words triggered recognition from the billboard's marketing copy flowing past his vision. Vought International, home of heroes. Compound V, the miracle that creates miracles. Soups, superheroes, corporate branding. This world had powered individuals, but they were products, marketed like soap, controlled by corporations. Zod's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on someone capable of genuine humor. He had expected to find himself facing Superman and his league of self-righteous fools, forced into another tiresome battle over philosophy and honor. Instead, the Phantom Zone's breach had deposited him into a universe where these humans had created their own false gods and packaged them for profit. How deliciously perfect. "Attention, unregistered superhuman," a voice crackled from speakers mounted on approaching vehicles. "Police," Zod registered, though their weapons were laughably inadequate. "You are in violation of Federal Superhuman Registration Act. Power down and surrender immediately." Zod turned his head slowly toward the police barricade forming at the edge of the square. Officers crouched behind cars, weapons aimed at him with shaking hands. He could hear their elevated heart rates, smell the fear sweat evaporating from their skin, see their fingers trembling on triggers. One officer was praying under his breath. Another had already wet himself. "I am General Zod of Krypton," he said, his voice carrying across the square with perfect clarity, despite speaking barely above conversational volume. "I do not power down. I do not surrender. I certainly do not kneel to primitives with projectile weapons." He took a single step forward. The concrete beneath his boot cracked like thin ice. "However, I am willing to accept your unconditional surrender. You have 10 seconds to kneel." The police opened fire. Bullets sparked off his armor, his skin, his eyes, which he left open deliberately to demonstrate the futility of their resistance. The sound of sustained gunfire echoed between buildings as Zod stood motionless, letting them empty their magazines into his body with zero effect. When the shooting stopped and the officers stared in horror at the completely unharmed figure walking toward them, Zod's eyes began to glow red. 9 seconds, he said calmly. Before he could demonstrate the consequences of defiance, the air itself seemed to split with a sonic boom. A blur of red, white, and blue descended from the sky, landing between Zod and the police barricade with enough force to crack the pavement. The figure straightened, cape settling around his shoulders, and Zod found himself face to face with the blonde man from the billboards. Up close, the resemblance to Superman was superficial at best. The same blue suit, the same cape, the same blonde hair carefully styled for the maximum heroic effect. But Zod's enhanced senses cataloged the differences immediately. This man's cellular structure was human, enhanced by something chemical rather than solar radiation. His heartbeat carried an edge of arrhythmia. His muscles, while impressive by human standards, were barely superhuman by Kryptonian measure. And his eyes, behind the false confidence and media-trained smile, held the flat affect of a sociopath. "Hey there, big guy," the blonde man said, his voice carrying that distinctive American affect Zod recognized from countless propaganda broadcasts in his own universe. "I'm Homelander, leader of the Seven, and you just made a big mistake coming to my city and threatening my people." Zod's enhanced hearing picked up the man's elevated heart rate, fear masked by bravado. His thermal vision detected stress hormones flooding the man's bloodstream. This Homelander was terrified but committed to maintaining his public persona for the cameras Zod could hear clicking from every direction. "Your city," Zod repeated, his tone carrying the weight of someone who had actually ruled cities, planets, entire sectors of space. "Your people. Tell me, Homelander, are you their protector or their product?" The question landed like a physical blow. Homelander's smile flickered for just a fraction of a second, and Zod saw the narcissistic rage ignite behind those artificially blue eyes. "I'm the greatest hero this planet has ever seen," Homelander said, floating 6 inches off the ground in a display of dominance. "And you're just another super terrorist who's about to learn what happens when you fuck with the Seven." Zod's smile widened. In his universe, he had faced beings who could shatter planets, warriors trained since birth in combat arts these humans couldn't comprehend, and gods who existed before mortal races learned to build fire. This corporate mascot thought floating a few inches off the ground was impressive. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. "Hope shines brightest in the darkest night," someone was narrating from a nearby news helicopter, apparently live streaming this confrontation. Zod filed away the strange custom. This universe's humans narrated their lives for distant audiences. How perfectly in keeping with the manufactured heroism on display. "Very well," Zod said, clasping his hands behind his back in a military at-ease posture that communicated supreme confidence. "Show me what happens, false hero. Show me the power of your compound fee against true Kryptonian might. And when you fail, when you lie broken at my feet and your corporate masters realize they cannot control me, perhaps then this planet will learn what it means to kneel before a real god." Homelander's eyes blazed red, heat vision building. The cameras zoomed in, the police retreated. Times Square held its breath. And General Zod, standing in a universe without Superman, without the Justice League, without anyone who could actually stop him, finally allowed himself to feel something approaching satisfaction. This world had created false gods and worshipped them. He would show them the difference between marketing and divinity. The war for the boys' universe had begun. Homelander's heat vision lanced across the space between them, twin beams of superheated energy that could melt steel, cut through concrete, and had once bisected a terrorist in front of a live studio audience. The crowd gasped. Cameras captured every millisecond. This was the moment. Homelander, America's greatest hero, defending his city against an alien threat. Zod didn't move, didn't dodge, didn't even blink. The heat vision struck his face dead center and simply stopped. The energy dissipated against Kryptonian cellular structure like water against a mountain. Zod's expression didn't change. His eyes didn't water. His skin didn't redden. For 3 full seconds, Homelander poured everything he had into his heat vision while Zod stood motionless, hands still clasped behind his back, staring at the blonde hero with the mild interest of an entomologist observing an insect. When Homelander finally stopped, panting slightly from the exertion, Zod tilted his head. "Was that your maximum output?" he asked. "Disappointing." Then Zod's eyes ignited red, and the difference was apocalyptic. The heat vision that erupted from Zod's eyes wasn't the focused beams Homelander produced. It was a wave of thermal devastation, the optical equivalent of staring into a star's core. Homelander had 1/10 of a second to register the danger before the energy hammered into him like a physical force, launching him backward through the air. He crashed through the glass facade of the Vought Tower, through 3 interior walls, and finally stopped when he hit a steel support beam hard enough to bend it. Blood trickled from Homelander's nose. Actual blood. His suit was scorched. His hair, perfectly styled moments ago, smoked at the edges. Pain radiated through his chest, ribs possibly cracked. This was impossible. Nothing hurt Homelander. Nothing. In Times Square, Zod lowered his gaze, his eyes dimming back to normal. The crowd stood frozen in shock. The police hadn't moved. Even the news helicopters had pulled back to a safer distance. 37 news cameras, Zod observed, his enhanced vision cataloging each recording device. 14 police body cameras. Approximately 8,000 personal communication devices currently transmitting video. Your species documents everything. Good. Let the world watch. He lifted off the ground, not the tentative hovering Homelander had demonstrated, but a smooth, effortless levitation that spoke of absolute mastery over gravitational forces. Zod rose until he was 50 feet above the crater, visible to every camera, every phone, every terrified face staring up at him. "People of Earth," he began, his voice amplified by deliberate control of his vocal cords to carry across the entire city block. "My name is General Druzod. I am a Kryptonian, a race you have never encountered from a universe you cannot comprehend. The breach that brought me here has closed, which means I am stranded on your primitive world. This presents me with a choice." He gestured toward the Vought Tower, where Homelander was presumably recovering. "Your so-called superheroes are frauds, enhanced humans created by chemical experimentation, marketed as saviors, controlled by corporations that profit from your worship of false idols. Your Homelander is to a real Kryptonian what a house cat is to a tiger. You have been deceived." Inside Vought Tower Security Center, screens exploded with activity. Analysts scrambled. Someone shouted about getting Ashley on the line. Another yelled about media containment. A third was already drafting a statement about how this was clearly CGI, a publicity stunt, anything but an actual superhuman who had just bodied Homelander on live television. In the executive suite, 70 floors up, Stan Edgar watched the monitors with the detached interest of a man who had built an empire by maintaining perfect control over every superhuman asset in America. His expression never changed, but his fingers drummed once against his desk, the only tell that something had genuinely surprised him. "Get me everything on Kryptonians," he said to his assistant. "Check every database, every comic book, every science fiction archive, and find out where Homelander is, now." "I offer you 2 paths," Zod continued, his voice carrying to millions through every news feed, streaming his declaration. "Submit peacefully to my rule, and I will bring order to your chaotic world. Your crime, your wars, your suffering, all will end under Kryptonian governance. I am a military commander. I know how to create peace through strength." A smile that held no warmth crossed his face. "Or resist. Deploy your armies. Send your fraudulent heroes. Attempt to kill me with your primitive weapons. And I will demonstrate why Krypton conquered a dozen worlds before your species learned to forge bronze. The choice is yours, but I am not a patient god." He descended slowly, landing in the center of the crater with perfect precision. "You have 24 hours to respond. I will be here, waiting for your world leaders to kneel or for your champions to die trying to stop me. Either outcome is acceptable." The transmission ended, not because Zod stopped talking, but because every news station simultaneously cut the feed, replaced it with technical difficulties messages, started airing prepared statements about an elaborate hoax, a terrorist attack, anything to explain what millions had just witnessed. But the damage was done. Social media exploded. Real Superman trended within minutes. Homelander Exposed hit number 2. Conspiracy theorists and comic book fans flooded forums with explanations. Governments activated emergency protocols, and in the White House Situation Room, the President of the United States stared at a frozen image of Zod floating above Times Square and asked the only question that mattered: can anyone stop him? Nobody had an answer. In the boys' basement headquarters, a grimy safe house in Brooklyn that smelled of stale beer and poor life choices, Billy Butcher replayed the footage for the 7th time. Huey stood beside him, still processing what they'd just watched. cleaned his gun with mechanical precision, his jaw clenched. Frenchie and Kimiko exchanged glances, her signing questions he couldn't answer. "Bloody hell," Butcher finally said, his British accent thickening with stress. "That's not Compound V." "How do you know?" Huey asked. "Because I've seen what Compound Phi does, Huey. Creates freaks with powers, sure. But that?" He jabbed a finger at the screen showing Homelander getting launched through a building. "That's something else entirely. That's what Homelander pretends to be." "So what do we do?" asked, still not looking up from his weapon. "Guy just declared war on the entire planet. That includes us." Butcher's expression darkened. He'd spent years fighting to expose Vought, to bring down Homelander, to show the world that their heroes were corporate manufactured monsters. And now an actual alien god had shown up to do exactly that, while also promising to enslave humanity. "We do what we always do," Butcher said, reaching for the burner phone he used for his most dangerous calls. "We find the cunt's weakness, and we put him down like the rabid dog he is. But first," he dialed a number he'd hoped never to use again. "We need help." Back in Times Square, Zod stood in his crater, waiting. Police maintained a perimeter but didn't approach. The few brave souls who'd stayed to watch kept their distance. And high above, circling in a holding pattern, news helicopters captured footage of the alien warrior standing motionless in the heart of Manhattan. A living declaration of war that no amount of corporate spin could erase. Inside Vought Tower, Homelander stumbled out of the wreckage, his perfect face marred by cuts that were already healing, his ego shattered beyond any V-enhanced regeneration. He'd felt pain, real pain, and worse, fear, the primitive, animal terror of prey, recognizing a predator so far above its weight class that resistance was meaningless. Ashley Barrett, Vaught's VP of Hero Management, rushed toward him with a tablet already displaying damage control strategies. "Homelander, thank God you're okay. We need you to make a statement. Something about how you let him hit you to test his power level. You were holding back. The cameras didn't capture how you actually..." Homelander's hand shot out, grabbed her throat, and lifted her off the ground. His eyes blazed red, rage and humiliation warring in his expression. Ashley gasped, tablet clattering to the floor, feet kicking uselessly. "He's stronger than me," Homelander whispered, his voice cracking. "He's faster. He's everything I'm supposed to be, everything you people told me I was, and it's all a lie." He dropped Ashley, who collapsed gasping. Homelander stood there, fists clenched, his entire worldview crumbling. He was supposed to be the apex, the ultimate, the god among men. But Zod had treated him like a child playing dress-up. "Get Stan," Homelander said quietly. "Get everyone. We need to kill that thing before the world realizes I'm nothing." In his executive suite, Stan Edgar had already reached the same conclusion. Zod couldn't be controlled, couldn't be marketed, couldn't be weaponized. He was a threat to everything Vought had built, a multi-billion-dollar empire predicated on the illusion that their suppies were the pinnacle of human achievement. "Contact the 7, Edgar ordered, all of them, and reach out to our military liaisons. If this Kryptonian is what he claims, we'll need everyone." He pulled up files on deep storage projects, experimental weapons, contingencies developed for the day, a soupy finally went too rogue to handle through PR alone. Black Noir's file, Soldier Boy's containment records, projects that had never seen daylight because Homelander had been controllable. This Zod was not. "And get me that British lunatic," Edgar added. "Butcher. He's made a career of killing the unkillable. Let's see if he can do it one more time." The emergency meeting in Vault Tower's executive conference room had the atmosphere of a funeral where the corpse kept twitching. The seven sat on one side of the table, or what remained of them. Homelander at the head, jaw clenched, eyes distant. Queen Maeve nursing a drink despite it being 11 a.m., her expression suggesting she'd long since stopped caring about appearances. A-Train fidgeting nervously, his metabolism burning through anxiety like rocket fuel. The Deep looking confused about why he'd even been called in. Black Noir standing motionless in the corner, silent as always. Starlight, Annie January, sat apart from the others, her face conflicted. On the other side sat Stan Edgar, Ashley Barrett with her tablet like a security blanket, and a collection of Vault executives who looked like they were calculating whether their stock options would survive an alien invasion. "Let me be clear," Edgar began, his voice carrying the unflappable authority of a man who'd weathered every PR nightmare imaginable. "General Zod represents an existential threat not just to Vault, but to the entire superhero industrial complex. If the world sees that our enhanced individuals are inferior to an actual alien species, the market implications are catastrophic." "Fuck the market implications," Homelander snapped, his voice carrying an edge that made everyone except Edgar flinch. "That thing humiliated me on live television, made me bleed, made me look weak." "You looked weak because you are weak," Maeve said, taking another drink. "We all are. Compared to that, we're just lab experiments that got lucky. He's the real deal. Watch your mouth." "Or what, Homelander? You'll laser vision me? Save it for someone who gives a shit." Maeve leaned back in her chair. "I've been saying for years that we're frauds playing hero. Congratulations. The universe just sent proof." The tension in the room crystallized into something dangerous. A-Train's knee bounced faster. The Deep looked between them like watching a tennis match. Starlight's hands clenched under the table, her powers sparking faintly with stress. "Enough," Edgar said, his quiet words somehow cutting through the conflict. "Queen Maeve is correct about the power differential. Our internal analysis of the footage confirms that Zod's heat vision operates at approximately 15,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to vaporize tungsten. Homelander's maximum output is 3,000. The force required to launch Homelander through reinforced glass and structural steel suggests strength in excess of 50,000 tons, possibly unlimited." He pulled up a holographic display showing Zod's position in Times Square. Surveillance feeds from every angle. He hasn't moved in 3 hours, hasn't eaten, hasn't slept, hasn't shown any sign of fatigue. He's simply waiting, exactly as he said he would. This is not bravado. This is a military commander who knows he's already won unless we find a weakness. "So find one," Homelander demanded. "You people created me, created all of us. Figure out how to kill a fucking alien." "We're working on it," Ashley interjected, her voice cracking slightly. "Our science division is analyzing every second of footage, looking for vulnerabilities. His armor, his cellular structure, anything we can exploit. But sir," she looked at Edgar helplessly, "we don't have samples, we don't have medical data, we're working blind." "Then get creative," Edgar said. "In the meantime, we need a public strategy. The narrative is already spiraling. Nash Neeler fight is trending worldwide. Foreign governments are demanding action. The president wants answers we don't have." "What about the old man?" Maeve asked suddenly. "Soldier Boy. You've got him locked up in some black site, right? His radiation could depower soups. Maybe it works on Kryptonians." Edgar's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Soldier Boy is contained in a medically induced coma, specifically because he's too dangerous to control. Releasing him would be trading one apocalyptic threat for another." "But he's American," Ashley said, her PR instincts kicking in. "He's controllable, sort of, more than an alien dictator anyway." "No," Homelander said flatly. "I'm not playing second fiddle to that fossil. We handle this ourselves." "How?" Starlight spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the posturing. "How exactly do we handle someone who can tank your heat vision without flinching? I'm asking seriously, because from where I'm sitting, every option involves a lot of dead civilians and us losing anyway." Homelander's head turned toward her with predatory focus. "You got a better idea, Starlight? Maybe you want to surrender? Kneel to the alien like he asked. I want to not get everyone killed because you're having a narcissistic crisis. Annie shot back, her powers flaring brighter. That thing is everything you pretend to be. Deal with it. Homelander rose from his chair, his cape swirling dramatically. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. His eyes began glowing red, and for a moment, everyone thought he might actually do it, might laser vision Starlight right there in the conference room. Stand down, Homelander, Edgar said, his voice carrying absolute authority. Now! The two men locked eyes, Homelander seething with wounded pride and rage. Edgar completely calm, holding his gaze with the confidence of someone who still held leverage. Finally, mercifully, Homelander's eyes dimmed. He sat back down, but the threat lingered in the air like ozone. We have other assets, Edgar continued as if nothing had happened. Military resources, Black Ops teams, and, he paused deliberately, unofficial assets, people who specialize in killing supes. You mean Butcher, Maeve said. You're actually going to work with the boys. The enemy of my enemy, Edgar replied. Mr. Butcher has successfully killed multiple enhanced individuals with far fewer resources than we command. If anyone understands how to weaponize human ingenuity against superior power, it's him. He'll want something in return, Starlight said. Probably Homelander's head on a pike. Let him try, Homelander muttered. Ashley's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face going pale. Sir, we have a situation. Billy Butcher just walked into the lobby. He's asking to speak with you. He says it's about the Kryptonian. The room went silent. The idea of Billy Butcher, terrorist, soup killer, Volt's most persistent thorn, walking into Volt Tower voluntarily was so absurd it took a moment to process. Either he was insane or desperate, possibly both. Send him up, Edgar said, with security. Full detail. You're actually going to talk to that psychopath? Ashley asked. Ms. Barrett, a greater psychopath is currently standing in Times Square, promising to enslave humanity. I'll take my allies where I can find them. Edgar stood, adjusting his cufflinks. Homelander, you and the Seven will remain here. I don't need your ego starting a fight we can't afford. I could kill Butcher right now, Homelander said, but his voice lacked conviction. The fight with Zod had shaken something loose in his carefully constructed superiority complex. You could, Edgar agreed, but you won't, because despite everything, you're smart enough to know we need every advantage, even distasteful ones. 5 minutes later, Billy Butcher strode into the conference room, flanked by security guards who looked ready to shoot at the slightest provocation. He wore his signature black coat, his face carrying the permanent scowl of a man who'd seen too much and enjoyed none of it. His eyes swept the room, cataloging threats, noting Homelander's barely contained rage, Maeve's knowing smirk, Starlight's conflicted expression. Well, Butcher said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, ain't this cozy? The corporate cunts and their pet freaks, all in one room, almost makes me wish I'd brought grenades. Sit down, Mr. Butcher, Edgar said, gesturing to a chair. We have a mutual problem. We've got fuck all mutual, mate, but we do both have an alien problem. Butcher sat without waiting for the guards to clear him, deliberately turning his back on Homelander. I watched your golden boy get his ass handed to him. Gotta say, it was the highlight of me year, but he leaned forward, elbows on the table. That thing in Times Square, it ain't like Homelander. It ain't like any soup I've ever seen, which means it ain't gonna die like one neither. You lot understand that, yeah? Your little compound V cocktail creates enhanced humans. That's something else, something worse. We're aware, Edgar said, which is why you're here. You've made a career of killing the unkillable. I'm prepared to offer you resources, intelligence, and temporary immunity if you can find a way to neutralize Zod. And what's the catch? You work with us, not against us. You share information, and when this is over, Edgar paused. We discuss terms for your continued operations. Butcher laughed, a harsh bark of sound. You're offering me a fucking partnership? That's how scared you are. That's how badly he fucked your entire operation. Do we have a deal or not? Butcher's smile faded. He glanced at Homelander, who stared back with undisguised hatred. Then he looked at Maeve, who gave him the slightest nod, an acknowledgement of their complicated history. Finally, he looked at Starlight, who met his gaze evenly. "Yeah," Butcher said, "we got a deal, on one condition, which is, when this is over and that alien cunt is dead or gone, I get a free shot at Homelander. No interference, no consequences, just him and me." The room exploded with protest. Homelander shot to his feet. Security reached for weapons. Ashley made a sound like a strangled cat. Only Edgar remained calm. "No," he said simply. "Then no deal. Mr. Butcher, you'll help because the alternative is global enslavement. You're many things, but you're not suicidal. You want Homelander dead? So would Zod. The difference is Zod would enslave your friends, your colleagues, everyone you care about afterward. So we work together, we stop the alien, and then you and Homelander can settle your differences however you like, but not until Zod is handled." Butcher considered this. Huey's face flashed through his mind. The kid was probably terrified right now. Frenchie, Kimiko, they'd all die if Zod took over. And despite everything, despite all the death and darkness, Butcher still gave a shit about his crew. "Fine," he said, "but I'm running my own operation. You give me intel, resources, whatever I need. But I don't answer to your corporate hierarchy, and I definitely don't take orders from that flying wanker." He jerked a thumb at Homelander. "Acceptable," Edgar said. "Now, let's discuss how we kill a god." The war room Vought assembled looked like something from a military thriller. Screens displaying satellite imagery, thermal scans, radiation readings, and endless loops of Zod standing motionless in Times Square. Scientists from Vought's research division huddled with military advisors. Butcher sat at the far end of the table, Huey beside him looking deeply uncomfortable to be inside the building they'd spent years trying to destroy. Stood behind them, arms crossed, watching everyone with tactical suspicion. "Right," said Dr. Samir Shah, Vault's chief scientist, pulling up a holographic display of Zod's physiology extrapolated from the footage. "Based on what we've observed, Zod's cellular structure operates on principles completely foreign to compound V enhancement. His cells absorb and metabolize solar radiation, yellow sun specifically, converting it to energy that powers his abilities. Strength, speed, flight, heat vision, all of it stems from the solar battery effect. So we take away the sun," A-Train suggested. "Block it somehow." "With what?" asked. "You gonna build a shell around the Earth? Think before you speak." "What about red sun radiation?" Huey offered quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He flushed under the attention. "I mean, in the comics, Superman gets his powers from yellow sun, but loses them under a red sun. Maybe Zod works the same way?" Dr. Shaw nodded slowly. "It's a viable theory, but we have two problems. First, we don't have red sun radiation generators. They don't exist. We'd have to build them from scratch based on theoretical physics, and hope our assumptions about Kryptonian biology are correct. Second, even if we built them, we'd need to get close enough to Zod to deploy them. Based on his demonstrated speed and reaction time, he'd stop us before we got within 100 yards. "What about kryptonite?" Starlight asked. "That's Superman's weakness in every story." "Kryptonite is a fictional element," Dr. Shaw replied. "It doesn't exist in nature. However," he pulled up a different screen showing Compound V's molecular structure. Compound V is essentially a synthetic enhancer that rewrites human DNA. If Kryptonian cells metabolize solar radiation, it's possible that a reverse-engineered compound could disrupt that metabolic process. We could theoretically create a synthetic poison tailored to Kryptonian biology. "How long?" Edgar asked. "Weeks, maybe months. We'd need samples of Kryptonian tissue to test against, and..." "We don't have weeks," Homelander interrupted. "He gave us 24 hours, 16 of which are already gone." Butcher lit a cigarette despite Ashley's immediate protest about building regulations. "Then we don't kill him. Not yet. We hurt him. Make him bleed. Show the world he ain't invincible. Break his mythology before he breaks ours." "He tanked my heat vision," Homelander said. "What exactly do you propose we hit him with?" "Everything," Butcher replied. "Every soup you've got, every weapon in your arsenal. You cunts have been hoarding military-grade ordnance for years. Time to use it. We throw everything at him simultaneously. Even if it don't kill him, it gives the scientists time to work on that Kryptonian poison. You're suggesting a suicide mission, Maeve said. He'll slaughter us. Probably, Butcher agreed. But you're supposed to be heroes, right? Thought you lot were all about sacrifice and saving the day. Maeve laughed bitterly. We're about brand management and quarterly earnings. But sure, Billy, let's go die for the cameras. There's another option, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. Grace Mallory stood there, her CIA credentials visible on her lapel, her expression carrying the weight of someone who'd fought in wars these corporate heroes couldn't imagine. She walked into the room with the confidence of someone who'd faced down Homelander before and survived. Grace, Butcher said, surprised. Didn't expect to see you here. The president sent me, Mallory replied. This stopped being a Vought problem the moment Zod made his declaration. It's now a matter of national security, global security. She nodded to Edgar. Mr. Edgar, surprised you're entertaining Butcher. Desperate times, Edgar said smoothly. Mallory pulled up a classified file on the main screen. What I'm about to show you is above top secret. The U.S. military has been developing contingency plans for extraterrestrial threats since the 50s. We have orbital weapons platforms, experimental directed energy weapons, and one very particular asset that might work. The screen showed a facility deep underground, armed guards, hazmat protocols. Inside a containment chamber, suspended in some kind of energy field, was a glowing green crystal. What am I looking at? Homelander asked. Residual radiation from a meteor that struck Kansas in 1978, Mallory explained. The impact site showed elevated levels of exotic radiation that killed plant life for 100 yards in every direction. When we tried to move the meteor fragments, soldiers got sick. Cellular degradation, muscular failure, extreme pain. We've kept it contained ever since because we had no idea what to do with it. Huey leaned forward. Wait, 1978, Kansas. That's where Superman is supposed to have landed in the comics? Starlight finished. I'm saying we have a material that demonstrates the exact properties described in fictional accounts of kryptonite, Mallory confirmed. We don't know if it will work on Zod, but it's the closest thing to a silver bullet we have. The room erupted in simultaneous conversations, scientists demanding access to the material, military advisors calculating deployment strategies, Homelander looking simultaneously relieved and threatened by the idea that someone else might kill Zod before he could. Here's the problem, Mallory continued, raising her voice to cut through the noise. The radiation has a limited effective range, maybe 50 feet before it dissipates below lethal concentrations, and it's volatile. Weaponizing it would take days we don't have, which means someone has to get close to Zod and expose him to it directly. A suicide mission, said. Potentially, yes. Then that's what we do, Maeve said, standing up. I'll do it. I'll get close to him. Everyone stared at her. Homelander's expression shifted from surprise to suspicion. You? Why? Because I'm the only one here who's actually tired of the bullshit, Maeve said. You want to live? Fine. But someone has to try. And I'd rather die fighting an actual threat than spend one more day pretending to be a hero for Instagram likes. Starlight stood as well. I'll go with you. If it takes 2 people to get close enough. No, Maeve cut her off. You're actually good, Annie. Don't waste that on this. But she's right, Butcher interjected. We need someone expendable. Someone Zod might underestimate. Someone who can get close without triggering his military instincts. He looked around the room. We need bait. I'll do it, a quiet voice said from the corner. Everyone turned to look at Black Noir, who'd been silent throughout the entire meeting. He stepped forward, his masked face unreadable as always, but his body language spoke of determination. Ashley immediately started protesting. Black Noir is a valuable asset. We can't just... He volunteered, Edgar said, cutting her off. He looked at Black Noir with something that might have been respect. You understand this is likely one way? Black Noir nodded once. Then we have our delivery mechanism, Mallory said. I'll arrange transport for the kryptonite. We weaponize it. Something Black Noir can deploy at close range. A blade, maybe. Something he can use in combat. Meanwhile, Dr. Shaw added, We continue developing the synthetic option. If this fails, we'll need a backup plan. And what about me? Homelander demanded. I'm just supposed to sit here while a mute in a gimp suit tries to kill the alien that humiliated me? You're supposed to lead the Seven in a coordinated assault, Edgar said. Black Noir gets close, exposes Zod to kryptonite, weakens him. Then you and the others hit him with everything you have. Make it look like a team effort. The public needs to see their heroes fighting back. It's all optics with you people, Butcher muttered, even during the apocalypse. It's always optics, Mr. Butcher, Edgar replied. Public perception is the only weapon that matters in the long run. Even if we kill Zod, if the world sees Vought as ineffective, the company collapses. If we're going to save humanity, we're going to do it profitably. Huey looked like he might be sick. Shook his head in disgust. Even Starlight, who tried so hard to be a real hero within this system, looked defeated. When? Maeve asked. Mallory checked her watch. The kryptonite arrives in 3 hours. Weaponization takes another 2. We deploy at dawn. Zod said 24 hours. We'll give him his answer right on schedule. And if it doesn't work? A-Train asked nervously. No one answered. They didn't need to. If the kryptonite didn't work, if Black Noir failed to get close, if Zod was too fast, too strong, too different from the fictional Superman they were basing all their assumptions on, then humanity would learn what it meant to kneel before a real god. In Times Square, Zod stood exactly where he'd been for 16 hours. He hadn't moved, hadn't slept, hadn't shown any sign of discomfort despite the cold November wind. His enhanced hearing picked up the city around him, millions of heartbeats, thousands of conversations, police maintaining their perimeter, news helicopters circling. He heard them planning, the military bases activating protocols. The Vought Tower conference room filled with frightened voices debating how to kill him. Homelander's rage echoing through steel and concrete. They were doing exactly what he expected, scrambling, desperate, trying to find a weakness that didn't exist. Zod smiled. In his universe, he'd fought Superman dozens of times. He'd faced the entire Justice League. He'd been imprisoned in the Phantom Zone for crimes against Krypton. This universe? These humans with their chemical enhancements and corporate superheroes? They were children playing at war. But he would let them try. Let them deploy their weapons, their heroes, their desperate gambits. It would make the eventual subjugation more satisfying when they realized nothing they possessed could harm him. Come then, Zod said to the empty air, knowing the surveillance devices would catch every word. Send your champions. Bring your weapons. Show me what this world considers heroism. He clasped his hands behind his back and waited for dawn, when humanity would learn the difference between false gods created in laboratories and a true Kryptonian warrior tempered by conquest. The countdown to extinction had begun. Dawn broke over Manhattan with the kind of perfect lighting cinematographers dream about. Golden rays cutting through the urban canyons, casting long shadows across Times Square, where General Zod had stood motionless through the entire night. News helicopters had maintained their vigil, broadcasting his unmoving form to a world that had barely slept. Social media was a war zone of opinions. Surrender, fight, flee, negotiate. World leaders had spent the night in emergency sessions. Stock markets had crashed globally. Some people prayed, others looted. Humanity was doing what it always did when faced with the incomprehensible, panicking. Zod felt the sun's radiation wash over his Kryptonian cells, filling his reserves to capacity. 24 hours had passed exactly. Time to see what these humans would offer him, submission or futile resistance. His enhanced hearing detected them before they arrived. Multiple heartbeats approaching at superhuman speeds. The whine of aircraft engines. The distinctive electromagnetic signature of military weapons charging. And underneath it all, one heartbeat that carried an arrhythmic quality he recognized. Homelander coming for vengeance or validation. The Seven arrived first, descending from the sky in a formation clearly designed for maximum dramatic impact. Homelander at the center, cape billowing in the morning wind. Queen Maeve to his right, her expression resigned to what was coming. Starlight to his left, electricity crackling around her fists. A-Train vibrated in place. nervous energy barely contained. The Deep stood awkwardly at the edge. Even now, no one quite knew why he was there. And Black Noir, silent and ready, positioned slightly behind the others. "General Zod!" Homelander called out, his voice carrying the forced confidence of someone playing to cameras he knew were watching. "Your 24 hours are up. Here's our answer." Zod tilted his head, examining them with tactical precision. "You send children to fight a war. How American?" "We're giving you one chance," Homelander continued, ignoring the insult. "Leave Earth. Go back to wherever you came from. Do that, and nobody has to die today." "Incorrect," Zod replied calmly. "Many people will die today. The question is whether they die as martyrs for a doomed resistance or as lessons for a pacified population. Your choice." Homelander's eyes blazed red. "Wrong answer." The assault began with coordinated precision that suggested actual military planning rather than Vaught's usual theatrics. Starlight unleashed a concentrated blast of electrical energy, not at Zod directly, but at the ground beneath him, trying to disrupt his footing. A-Train became a blur, circling at supersonic speeds to create a vortex of wind and debris meant to blind and disorient. Maeve hurled a chunk of concrete the size of a car. The Deep did something with water from a nearby fountain that was immediately evaporated by the heat of the battle. Zod didn't move. The attacks struck him simultaneously. Electricity, kinetic force, debris, Homelander's heat vision lancing in from above. The explosion was spectacular, a genuine blockbuster movie moment captured by every camera angle imaginable. Smoke and dust billowed outward. The ground cratered deeper. For a moment, just a moment, there was hope that maybe, possibly, the combined might of the seven had actually hurt him. Then the smoke cleared. Zod stood exactly where he'd been, his armor unmarked, his expression carrying the mild disappointment of a teacher watching students fail a simple test. His eyes swept across the seven, cataloging their positions, their power outputs, their fear. "My turn," he said. Zod moved. One moment he was standing still. The next he was airborne, crossing the 100 yards to Homelander in a fraction of a second. His fist connected with Homelander's face with a sound like a thunderclap, launching the blonde hero backward through the air so fast he became a streak of blue and red. Homelander crashed into a building 6 blocks away, the impact triggering car alarms for a quarter-mile radius. A-Train tried to flee, pure survival instinct overriding any pretense of heroism. Zod's heat vision lanced out, not at lethal intensity, but enough to superheat the pavement in A-Train's path. The speedster hit the molten asphalt and tumbled, his momentum carrying him through a parked taxi that crumpled like tinfoil. Maeve charged with the desperate courage of someone who'd already accepted death. She swung a punch that would have shattered concrete, put her entire enhanced strength behind it. Zod caught her fist in his palm, stopped it completely, then squeezed. The sound of bones cracking was audible even over the chaos. Maeve screamed. Zod released her, letting her fall to her knees, cradling her shattered hand. "You have courage," he told her, wasted on fraudulent heroism, but present nonetheless. "I respect that." Starlight hit him with everything she had, drawing power from every electrical source in a 3-block radius, channeling enough voltage to power a small city. The blast struck Zod square in the chest. Brilliant white energy that would have incinerated anyone else. Zod's cape fluttered. His hair moved slightly, that was all. He walked through her energy blast like walking through rain, closed the distance between them in 4 measured steps, and placed one hand on her shoulder. Not violently, almost gently. "You're different from the others," Zod observed, his enhanced senses reading her elevated heart rate, the genuine fear mixed with determination in her expression. "You actually believe in what you're doing. How unfortunate that you chose the wrong side." He pushed, not hard by his standards, but enough to send Starlight sliding backward across the pavement, her powers flickering out from the shock. The Deep tried to run. Zod let him. One coward fleeing would demoralize others more effectively than one coward dead. That left Black Noir. The silent assassin moved with professional precision, drawing two knives from his suit and advancing on Zod with the calculated movements of someone who'd killed dozens of enhanced individuals. His heartbeat remained steady, his breathing controlled. Whatever fear he felt, he'd mastered it enough to function. Zod watched him approach with interest. "You're different as well. No enhanced heartbeat, no chemical markers in your bloodstream. You're baseline human in a suit, aren't you? Enhanced through technology rather than genetics." Black Noir didn't respond. He never did. He simply attacked. The knife strike was textbook perfect, targeting Zod's throat, then pivoting to his eye when the first blade skittered off invulnerable skin. Fast, efficient, lethal technique wasted on an unkillable opponent. Zod caught Black Noir's wrist mid-strike and examined the blade more closely. It glowed faintly green. Zod's tactical mind processed this in microseconds. Unknown material, faint radiation signature. The blade itself designed for close combat deployment. They'd found something. Some weapon they believed would harm him based on what? Fictional accounts of Kryptonian weaknesses? Comic book mythology? Interesting. "Let's test your theory," Zod said, releasing Black Noir's wrist. Black Noir immediately slashed again, the kryptonite blade aimed for Zod's face. This time Zod didn't dodge or catch it. He let it make contact with his cheek. The blade cut skin. Actual blood welled from the shallow wound, red against Kryptonian flesh. Pain registered. Minor, barely worth noting, but present. The green radiation emanating from the weapon was disrupting his cellular cohesion, weakening his invulnerability in a localized area around the blade. Zod smiled, blood trickling down his face. "Clever. You found a weakness. Unfortunately for you." He moved faster than Black Noir could track, ripping the kryptonite knife from the assassin's grip and examining it with genuine scientific curiosity. The radiation made his hand tingle unpleasantly. Prolonged exposure might actually prove dangerous. They'd correctly identified a vulnerability. I'm still strong enough to kill all of you, even weakened," Zod finished. He crushed the kryptonite blade in his fist, grinding the radioactive crystal to powder. The pain intensified. The powdered kryptonite against his skin was more effective than the blade, but Zod's military discipline let him endure it. He opened his hand, letting the green dust fall to the pavement, and watched as the shallow cut on his cheek began healing, now that the radiation source was destroyed. Black Noir stood frozen, his one weapon destroyed, facing a being he now knew could be hurt but couldn't be stopped. Behind his mask, some calculus was being made about whether dying heroically would matter. Homelander chose that moment to return, rocketing back into the battle zone with his face bloodied, his perfect hair disheveled, and his eyes blazing with pure rage. He slammed into Zod at supersonic speed, the impact creating a shockwave that shattered windows for blocks. The two beings, one manufactured hero, one genuine warrior, crashed through a building, through the structure's support columns, out the other side. They hit the ground in a tangle of capes and fury. Homelander got to his feet first, breathing hard, and unleashed his heat vision point blank into Zod's face. Zod's eyes ignited in response. Two sets of heat vision met in midair, red energy beams colliding and pushing against each other in a contest of raw thermal power. For 3 seconds, they were locked in this struggle, the air between them superheating to plasma temperatures. Then Zod's heat vision simply overpowered Homelander's, pushing through it like a knife through paper. The beam struck Homelander in the chest, burning through his suit, scorching skin. Homelander screamed, a sound of pain and humiliation and existential terror, and cut off his own heat vision, stumbling backward. Zod stood, dusting off his armor. Is this truly the best your world offers? Corporate mascots playing soldier? Enhanced humans who've never faced real combat? He looked around at the seven. Homelander bleeding, Maeve cradling her broken hand, Starlight struggling to stand, A-Train unconscious in the wreckage of the taxi, Black Noir weaponless, the Deep long gone. Pathetic. That's when the military arrived. Apache helicopters crested the buildings, their weapon systems locked on Zod. Armored vehicles rolled into the square from multiple directions. Soldiers in tactical gear established firing positions. At street level, Grace Mallory stood beside an armed convoy, a radio in her hand. "General Zod," her voice crackled over loudspeakers, "by order of the President of the United States, you are ordered to stand down immediately or face lethal military action." Zod looked at the assembled firepower, conventional weapons, missile systems, possibly some experimental ordnance. Impressive by human standards, completely inadequate for actually harming him. Finally, he said, "A proper response. Not heroes, not corporate products, soldiers. I can respect that." He rose into the air, arms spread wide, presenting himself as a target. "Fire everything." Mallory hesitated for just a moment. This was insane, deliberately drawing fire, then gave the order. "All units, weapons free." The world exploded. The coordinated military strike turned Times Square into a vision of mechanized hell. Apache helicopters unleashed their full payload, AGM-114 Hellfire missiles streaking through the morning air, 30mm chain guns spitting depleted uranium rounds at 600 per minute. Armored vehicles fired in sequence, their main cannons sending high-explosive shells directly at Zod's hovering form. Soldiers on the ground opened up with everything from standard assault rifles to experimental plasma weapons Vought had quietly sold to the Pentagon over the years. The explosions were magnificent. Massive fireballs bloomed across the square, shockwaves shattering what few windows remained intact. The sound was apocalyptic, a continuous rolling thunder that drowned out screams, sirens, everything. Smoke and debris filled the air so thickly that the news helicopter's cameras lost visual contact with Zod entirely. For 30 seconds, the assault continued. Millions of dollars of ordnance expended in a desperate attempt to kill what conventional wisdom said couldn't be killed. When the order finally came to cease fire and the smoke began to clear, every camera in the world focused on that one spot, desperately hoping to see a crater, a body, anything that suggested humanity had a chance. Zod descended slowly through the smoke, completely unharmed. His armor had scorch marks. That was all. Not a scratch on his skin. Not even breathing hard. He landed in the center of the devastation, crater surrounded by burning vehicles and injured soldiers, and surveyed the carnage with the clinical detachment of a general assessing battlefield performance. "Adequate firepower," he said, his voice easily carrying over the chaos. "Poor tactical deployment. You telegraphed your positions too obviously, wasted ammunition on saturating a single target rather than establishing kill zones and fallback positions. If I were actually vulnerable to your weapons, you might have succeeded. As it is," he turned to look directly at Grace Mallory, who stood her ground despite the absolute failure of everything she'd thrown at him. "You sent your soldiers to die. That takes courage, misguided courage, but I acknowledge it nonetheless. I offer you the same choice I offer all military commanders. Surrender your forces, kneel, and I will spare their lives. Continue this futile resistance, and I will be forced to demonstrate why Krypton conquered worlds while your species was still hiding in caves." Mallory's jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed to order a retreat, save what soldiers she could. But the cameras were watching. The world was watching. If she surrendered now, humanity surrendered. "Negative," she said into her radio. "All units, Pattern Delta. Execute now." Pattern Delta, the contingency plan for when everything else failed. Vaught's black site research, deployed without approval, without oversight, because desperate times demanded unthinkable measures. The armored convoy opened, and out stepped a figure that made Homelander's expression shift from pain to something approaching panic. Soldier Boy. He looked exactly like the propaganda posters from the 1980s. Square jaw, perfect hair gone slightly gray, the suit that predated modern superhero branding. But where those posters showed a confident smile, this version of Soldier Boy had eyes that held nothing but rage, barely contained by decades of medically induced unconsciousness. They'd woken him up, pumped him full of combat stimulants, and pointed him at the target. "What the fuck?" Homelander breathed, struggling to his feet. "You let him out?" "Ben," Mallory said, her voice carrying command authority. "The alien, he's the threat. Everything else, Homelander, Vought, all of it, comes after. Understood?" Soldier Boy cracked his neck, rolling his shoulders like a boxer preparing for a bout. His eyes locked on Zod with predatory focus. Fucking alien thinks he can come to my country and start giving orders? I killed commies for 40 years. Aliens ain't much different. Zod observed this new arrival with interest. Enhanced physiology, similar to the others, but different. Older, the cellular structure more primitive, first or second generation enhancement, rather than the refined compounds they'd used on Homelander. And something else. A radiation signature building in his chest, growing stronger by the second. Another manufactured hero, Zod said. How many failures will you send before accepting reality? I ain't no fucking failure, Soldier Boy snarled. The radiation in his chest reached critical mass, and he unleashed it. The beam that erupted from Soldier Boy wasn't heat vision or electricity. It was pure radiation. The same energy that had depowered countless soups over the decades, stripped them of their compound fire enhancements, left them human and vulnerable. The green-gold energy slammed into Zod with the force of a tactical nuke. For the first time since arriving in this universe, Zod actually felt something concerning. The radiation attacked his cellular structure directly, attempting to disrupt the solar energy storage that powered his abilities. His vision flickered, his strength wavered. The sensation was similar to the kryptonite blade, but broader, more systemic. If this continued, he might actually be in danger. Zod's tactical mind recalibrated instantly. Threat level, significant. Response required, overwhelming force. He pushed through the radiation beam. It was weakening him, yes, but not fast enough to prevent him from acting. He closed the distance to Soldier Boy in under a second, grabbed the older suit by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Impressive weapon, Zod said, even as the radiation continued to pour from Soldier Boy's chest at point-blank range. But you made a critical error. You assumed it would work fast enough. He slammed Soldier Boy into the pavement hard enough to crack concrete, then again, then a third time. The radiation beam flickered and died as Soldier Boy's concentration broke. Zod held him down, one hand on his chest, feeling his own strength already returning as the solar radiation in his cells began repairing the damage. "Ben!" Mallory shouted, already knowing it was over. Zod looked up at her, still holding Soldier Boy down. "Your weapons can hurt me. The green crystal. This one's radiation. Given time, you might even develop something lethal. But time is something I will never give you." He rose into the air, dragging Soldier Boy with him by the throat. 50 feet, 100 feet, high enough that every camera could capture the moment. "Let this be your final lesson in the difference between us," Zod announced to the watching world. "Your champions fall, your weapons fail, your hope dies. There is only one path forward." "Wait!" Starlight's voice cracked with desperation. She'd managed to get to her feet, electricity sparking weakly around her trembling hands. "Wait, you don't have to do this. You said you'd accept surrender, that you'd spare lives if we knelt. Was that a lie? Are you just another murderer, or are you actually what you claim to be? A military commander with honor?" Zod paused, genuinely considering her words. He looked down at the assembled forces, broken heroes, defeated soldiers, desperate civilians watching from behind police barricades. Then at Soldier Boy, still struggling weakly in his grip. Finally at Starlight, this one genuine idealist in a sea of cynics and corporate puppets. "You raise a valid point," he said. "I did offer terms. Very well." He descended, carrying Soldier Boy down, and dropped him at Mallory's feet. The older suit was unconscious but alive, his chest still glowing faintly with residual radiation. "I am not a murderer," Zod continued, addressing Starlight directly. "I am a conqueror. There is a difference. Murderers kill randomly, without purpose. I kill strategically, when necessary to achieve objectives. Your world has fought. You have demonstrated your capabilities. I have assessed your strengths and found them insufficient." He gestured at the devastation around them. Burning vehicles, injured soldiers, defeated heroes. "Now you have a choice. Continue this futile resistance, Force me to kill thousands to pacify millions, or accept the inevitable and spare yourselves unnecessary suffering. I will give you 1 hour to discuss among yourselves. Bring me your leaders, your generals, your presidents and prime ministers. We will negotiate the terms of your surrender. You will have autonomy within the framework of Kryptonian oversight. Your people will be protected, your criminals punished, your chaos transformed into order. Under your rule, Homelander spat, having finally gotten close enough to hear, you're asking the whole planet to kneel to you. Yes, Zod said simply. That is exactly what I'm asking. Because the alternative is watching your cities burn while you throw heroes and soldiers at me until you run out of both. I am one being, you are billions. Under my guidance, you could become something greater than this fractured, profit-driven society where heroes are corporate products and justice is a marketing campaign. He locked eyes with Homelander. You know I'm right. Your entire existence is a lie. You're not a hero. You're a commodity, a weapon Vought controls through manipulation and fear. Under my rule, you could be free of that. Serve a purpose greater than quarterly earnings and brand management. Fuck you, Homelander said, but his voice lacked conviction. Zod turned to Mallory. 1 hour. Bring me your leaders or I will bring this entire city down around your ears. The choice, as always, is yours. He walked back to his crater in the center of Times Square, sat down on a chunk of broken concrete, and waited. Around him, the wounded were being evacuated. Soldiers retreated to establish new perimeters. The 7 limped away to lick their wounds and contemplate their absolute defeat. News helicopters captured it all. The alien warrior sitting calmly amid the destruction he'd caused, offering terms that sounded reasonable until you remembered they meant the end of human sovereignty. In Vought Tower, Stan Edgar watched the footage with the expression of a man watching his empire crumble in real time. Ashley was already fielding calls from board members demanding answers. Analysts were calculating the stock impact. PR teams were drafting statements that would somehow spin this catastrophe. Get me everyone, Edgar said quietly. CIA, NSA, Pentagon, every scientist we have. Tell them we have 1 hour to find a way to kill a god, or we spend the rest of human history kneeling to one. In the boys' safe house, Butcher rewound the footage of the kryptonite blade cutting Zod. It had worked. For one moment, it had actually cut him. That meant he could bleed, and anything that could bleed could die. We need more, Butcher said to his team. More kryptonite, bigger dose, something that'll put him down permanent. Billy, Huey said carefully, even if we could get more, how do we get close enough? He just beat the 7 in the entire US military. What makes you think we can? Because we're not heroes, Butcher interrupted. We don't fight fair. We don't give warnings. We find what kills him and we shove it down his throat while he's busy monologuing about honor and conquest. That's how you kill gods, Huey. You stop treating them like gods. checked his weapon. Frenchie pulled up schematics of potential delivery systems. Kimiko signed something that roughly translated to, I can get close to him. The countdown had begun. 1 hour until Zod's deadline. 1 hour to find a miracle, a weapon, a plan that could stop what no army had managed. 1 hour before humanity knelt or humanity burned. The emergency session convened in a Pentagon bunker 300 feet underground, where the most powerful people in the world gathered to discuss surrendering it. The president sat at the head of the table, flanked by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the director of the CIA, and representatives from NATO, the UN, and a dozen other acronyms that supposedly meant something before an alien god decided their opinions were irrelevant. Stan Edgar attended via secure video link, his face impassive as always. Grace Mallory stood beside a holographic display showing real-time footage of Zod sitting calmly in Times Square, counting down the minutes. Options, the president said, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a man who'd aged a decade in 24 hours. Someone give me options that don't involve 7 billion people becoming subjects of an alien empire. Nuclear option, General Hendricks offered, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. ICBM strike, multiple warheads, vaporize everything within a 5-mile radius. He tanked Hellfire missiles without flinching, Mallory countered. You really think nukes will work? Even if they did, you're talking about destroying Manhattan. Millions dead, for what might not even slow him down. The kryptonite worked, the CIA director interjected, pulling up footage of Black Noir's blade cutting Zod's cheek. We have confirmation that the material from the Kansas meteor site can penetrate his defenses. Why not weaponize more of it? Because we only recovered 47 grams from the original impact site, Dr. Shaw explained via video conference from Voigt's labs. And we've already used 30 grams creating the blade Black Noir deployed. What remains is barely enough for one more weapon. Maybe two if we dilute it, but that reduces efficacy. Then we make it count, Mallory said. One shot, point blank, maximum concentration. We coat a bullet. We get a sniper with perfect aim. He has super hearing, Edgar interrupted smoothly. He'll hear the trigger pull before the bullet leaves the chamber. Even kryptonite-enhanced rounds would need to travel at conventional velocities. He'll dodge or catch it. So we get closer, Butcher's voice crackled over a separate secure line. He'd somehow hacked into the conference. Typical Butcher, invited or not. Stop trying to fight him like a military target. He's expecting that. Expects the big show, the weapons, the heroes. Give him something he ain't expecting. And what would that be, Mr. Butcher? The president asked, surprisingly tolerant of the intrusion. Treachery, Butcher replied. He wants leaders to negotiate surrender, so we send them. We send someone he'll let get close. Someone who can smile and kneel and stick a kryptonite blade between his ribs while he's basking in his fucking victory. You're suggesting we send a diplomat to assassinate him during surrender negotiations, the Secretary of State said, horrified. That violates every principle of... Principles are for species that ain't about to be enslaved. Butcher cut her off. You want to die with your morals intact? Be my guest. I'd rather live as a treacherous cunt than die as an honorable corpse. Silence fell over the room. The horrible thing was, Butcher was right. Conventional warfare had failed. Superhuman combat had failed. The only weapon that worked required close proximity to deploy, and Zod was smart enough not to let armed threats near him. But a diplomat? A leader coming to discuss terms? He might allow that. Who would we send? The president asked quietly, already knowing he was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Someone he'd respect, Mallory said, her tactical mind already working the problem. Someone with military background. Someone who could plausibly argue for surrender while hiding a weapon. Someone... Her eyes drifted to Edgar's video feed. No, Edgar said immediately, understanding her implication. I'm a civilian, a businessman. He'd never believe I have the authority. You're the CEO of VOT International, Mallory countered. You literally control every superhuman asset in America. You created the hero industry. If anyone represents this world's power structure besides the president himself, it's you. And unlike the president, you're expendable. Edgar's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Pride, maybe, or calculation. You want me to walk up to an alien conqueror with a kryptonite knife hidden in my jacket and hope he doesn't notice? I want you to buy us time while our scientists develop something better, the president said. Engage him in negotiations. Make him think we're actually considering surrender. And if you get an opening, he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I'll do it, a new voice said. Everyone turned to the monitor showing Vought Tower, where Queen Maeve had appeared beside Edgar. Her hand was in a cast, her face bruised, but her expression carried the determination of someone who'd already died inside and was just waiting for her body to catch up. I'll negotiate with him, Maeve continued. I'm one of the 7. I fought him. He respected that, said I had courage. He might actually listen to me. And unlike Stan, I can survive long enough to get close even if he realizes what I'm doing. Your hand is broken, Mallory observed. I've got another one, and I only need one hand to hold a knife. Maeve looked directly into the camera. You want someone to kill a god? Send a fallen hero. Poetic justice. Stan Edgar studied her through the video link. Queen Maeve, jaded, alcoholic, long since disillusioned with superhero theatrics. But underneath that cynicism was the woman who'd once actually believed in saving people. Maybe still did, despite everything Vought had done to corrupt it. You understand this is likely suicide, Edgar said. Stan, I've been committing slow suicide for years. This is just faster, and at least this way, I go out doing something that actually matters instead of endorsing energy drinks and pretending to give a shit about diversity initiatives. The decision was made. Maeve would approach Zod under diplomatic pretense, armed with the remaining kryptonite fashioned into something concealable. If she could get close enough, if she could catch him off guard, if the kryptonite worked as effectively as they hoped, she might actually hurt him, might even kill him. And if she failed, at least she'd bought time for whatever desperate backup plan they could concoct. One condition, Maeve said. When this is over, assuming I survive and the world doesn't end, Vought burns. All of it. The contracts, the NDAs, the Compound V experiments. You tear it all down and actually try to help people for once, instead of profiting off manufactured heroism. Edgar almost smiled. Almost. If you kill Zod, Ms. Daniels, I'll hand you the matches personally. 45 minutes later, Queen Maeve walked alone through the devastated Times Square. She'd refused the tactical vest, the hidden wire, the backup team Mallory wanted to position. This had to look real. One hero, humbled and defeated, coming to discuss surrender on behalf of a broken world. The kryptonite was fashioned into a small blade, hidden in a reinforced compartment built into her bracer. It pressed against her wrist, cold and slightly burning through the lead lining. Vaught's scientists had determined lead blocked the radiation enough to prevent injury to the carrier. She could draw it in under a second if she got the chance. If. Zod watched her approach from his seat on broken concrete, his enhanced vision undoubtedly cataloging every detail. Her elevated heart rate, the slight favor she gave her broken hand, the way her eyes couldn't quite meet his. But also her courage, the fact that she came alone, unarmed by conventional measure, to face someone who'd humiliated her in front of the world. Queen Maeve, Zod said as she stopped 10 feet away, I did not expect your leaders to send a warrior to negotiate. Bold choice. Or desperate one. Desperate, Maeve admitted. But you said you respected courage. So here I am, being courageously stupid. Zod stood, brushing dust from his armor. You have 43 minutes remaining. I assume your presence means your leaders wish to discuss terms? They're scared shitless, Maeve said bluntly. You beat the Seven, beat the military, proved everything we've built is a lie. So yeah, they want to talk terms. But I wanted to understand something first. She took a step closer. Zod allowed it. You talk about order, about ending crime and suffering, about making us something better than what we are. But you're asking us to give up freedom, to kneel, to accept an alien dictator because you've decided we can't govern ourselves. Another step. How is that different from Vought? From Homelander? From every other powerful asshole who decided they knew what's best for everyone else? Zod considered this genuinely. The difference is competence. I have conquered worlds, governed populations, created stable societies through strength and strategic administration. Your Vought creates heroes for profit. Your Homelander plays God while being controlled by image consultants. I am not playing. I am not marketing. I am offering actual security in exchange for submission. Still tyranny, Maeve said. Another step, 7 feet away now. Just competent tyranny. Yes, Zod agreed. Competent tyranny that keeps people alive versus incompetent democracy that leads to chaos and corporate exploitation. You've lived in this world longer than I have. Tell me honestly, is your system working? Are your people happy? Safe? Or are they terrified of heroes who might kill them, corporations that poison them, governments that fail them? Maeve's jaw clenched because he wasn't wrong. 5 feet away. Maybe our system sucks, she admitted. Maybe we've built a world where corporate superheroes pretend to save people while actually just selling products. But at least it's our shitty system, our choice to fix or fail with. You don't get to take that away just because you're stronger. I don't need permission, Zod replied. I need compliance, but I appreciate your honesty. He gestured to the space between them. Come closer. If we're to negotiate, let's do so as equals, or as close to equals as our situations allow. Maeve's heart hammered. This was it. 3 feet away. Close enough to draw the blade. Close enough to try. She took the final step. Maeve's hand moved toward her bracer with practiced speed. Years of combat training, muscle memory honed through countless fights. Her fingers found the release mechanism. The hidden compartment sprang open. The kryptonite blade, small and glowing faintly green, slid into her palm. She lunged forward, putting every ounce of her enhanced strength behind the strike, aiming for Zod's throat where the carotid would be on a human. Zod caught her wrist 6 inches from his neck. "I heard your heart rate increase 3 beats per minute 17 seconds ago," he said calmly, holding her arm immobile despite her struggling. "Heard the mechanical click of your bracer's release. Saw the thermal signature of the radioactive material. Did you truly think I wouldn't notice?" His eyes dropped to the kryptonite blade, glowing green between them. "Clever hiding place. Poor execution. A warrior's mistake. You telegraphed your intent through physiological stress. Your people's reliance on duplicity is predictable." He squeezed her wrist, not enough to break it, but enough to force her fingers open. The kryptonite blade clattered to the ground between them. Maeve's other hand, the broken one, shot forward in a desperate left hook that connected with Zod's jaw. Pain exploded through her shattered bones, but she didn't care. She'd failed the assassination, but she could still fight, still buy time, still. Zod's backhand sent her flying 20 feet, tumbling across the concrete. She hit the ground hard, stars exploding across her vision, tasting blood. "Courage without wisdom," Zod observed, looking down at the kryptonite blade. "Your people knew this material could harm me, yet sent only one warrior with a single small blade instead of developing it into something truly dangerous. Why? Time constraints? Limited supply?" He knelt, picking up the blade carefully. The green radiation made his skin tingle unpleasantly where it touched his fingers, but not enough to prevent him from holding it. "This is perhaps 40 grams of processed material, which suggests your total supply is minimal. You've revealed your only effective weapon and wasted it on a doomed assassination attempt instead of developing a real strategy." Maeve pushed herself up on her elbows, spitting blood. "Go fuck yourself." "I respect the attempt," Zod said, standing, "but I am a military commander who has faced assassination plots from civilizations far more advanced than yours. The warrior who killed Krypton's greatest general doesn't die to a hidden knife." He crushed the kryptonite blade in his fist, grinding it to powder just as he'd done with Black Noir's weapon. The pain was sharper this time, more concentrated radioactive material against his skin. But Zod's face remained impassive. When he opened his hand, green dust scattered in the wind, humanity's last verified weapon against him, literally slipping through their fingers. "Your hour is over," Zod announced, his voice carrying across the square to the cameras still recording everything. "I offered negotiation. You sent an assassin? This is your answer? Then you leave me no choice." He rose into the air, 50 feet, 100, until he was visible across half of Manhattan. His eyes began to glow red, building energy. "I will now demonstrate what resistance costs. 1 building, 1 monument to your corporate heroism. Consider it incentive for future cooperation." His heat vision lanced out toward Vault Tower in the distance. Twin beams of concentrated thermal energy, hot enough to melt steel. The beams struck the tower's upper floors where executive suites looked out over the city. Stan Edgar's office, the conference rooms, the symbols of Vault's power. Glass exploded outward. Steel support beams began to glow orange, then white. The building's structural integrity started to fail. "Stop!" Starlight's voice cracked with desperation. She'd appeared on a nearby rooftop, electricity crackling around her hands. "There are people in there, civilians, workers who have nothing to do with any of this." "Then they should evacuate," Zod replied, not stopping his assault on the tower. "You have approximately 90 seconds before structural collapse. I suggest you use them wisely." Inside Vault Tower, chaos erupted. Fire alarms screamed. Sprinkler systems activated and immediately evaporated in the heat. Employees ran for stairwells that were already filling with smoke. Ashley Barrett was screaming into her phone about evacuation protocols that no one had ever expected to actually use. On the executive floor, Stan Edgar calmly collected 3 specific files from his safe: insurance, leverage, contingencies, and walked toward the emergency elevator with the unhurried pace of a man who'd planned for this exact scenario. The 7 responded instinctively, their training and genuine heroic impulses overriding their fear. A-Train became a blur. running through the building at supersonic speed, grabbing people and depositing them outside. Starlight used her powers to illuminate escape routes through the smoke. Even the Deep tried to help, though his aquatic abilities were largely useless in a burning skyscraper. And Homelander stood frozen on a nearby rooftop, staring at the tower that bore his image, the building that represented everything he was supposed to be, burning because an actual alien god was proving he was nothing. Maeve dragged herself to her feet, ignoring the pain radiating through her body. "You said you weren't a murderer, that you killed strategically. What strategy does burning civilians serve?" "I am not burning civilians," Zod replied, still pouring heat vision into the building structure. "I am burning a symbol. Your people have 60 seconds to evacuate. If they die, it is because your infrastructure is inadequate, your heroes too slow, your society too dependent on corporate towers that prioritize aesthetics over safety. Their deaths would be on you, not me." He was right, and that made it worse. The tower was evacuating, but too slowly. Stairwells were bottlenecked. Emergency systems were failing. People were going to die, and it would technically be humanity's fault for building such a flawed structure, unless someone stopped it. Maeve looked at the tower, at the people still trapped inside, at Zod hovering above it all like a wrathful god. She thought about the kryptonite crushed to dust, about the Seven's humiliating defeat, about a world that might kneel to tyranny because it was easier than fighting. And she thought about the woman she'd been before Vought, before the cynicism and alcoholism and corporate sellout. The woman who'd actually wanted to save people. "Fuck it," she muttered. Maeve launched herself into the air, not toward Zod, but toward the tower itself. She crashed through a window on the 40th floor where smoke was thickest, where people were still trapped. Her broken hands screamed in protest as she grabbed a support beam, using her enhanced strength to hold it in place as the structure around it weakened. "Move!" she shouted to the employees frozen in panic. "Get to the stairs, now!" A-Train appeared beside her, his costume scorched from multiple trips through the burning building. "There's too many, we can't get them all out in time." "Then we make time," Maeve snarled. She turned toward the ceiling and began punching through floors, creating a vertical escape route. "Everyone up, climb, move your asses." Starlight flew in through another window, her powers drawing electricity from the building's dying systems to create guiding light through the smoke. "This way, follow the light." Outside, Zod observed their efforts with tactical interest. The tower was definitely collapsing. His heat vision had compromised too many support structures. But the Seven were actually performing heroically, putting civilian lives above their own safety, working together with genuine coordination instead of corporate-mandated teamwork. Interesting. He stopped his heat vision assault. The damage was done. The tower would fall within 5 minutes, but he'd allow them their heroic evacuation, let them save who they could. It would make better theater for what came next. Homelander finally moved, shaking off his paralysis. He flew into the tower's upper floors where the heat was most intense, where Stan Edgar was calmly descending in an elevator that was about 30 seconds from plummeting. Homelander ripped open the elevator shaft, grabbed Edgar by his expensive suit, and hauled him out seconds before the cable snapped. "I didn't do it for you," Homelander said as he deposited Edgar on the ground outside. "I did it so everyone knows I saved someone while that alien destroys everything." Edgar straightened his tie, unruffled even by near death. "Motivation is irrelevant to results, Homelander. For once, you acted like an actual hero. Don't ruin it by explaining why." The tower groaned, a terrible structural sound of metal twisting beyond its tolerances. A-Train made 3 more supersonic trips, evacuating the last stragglers. Maeve held a collapsing ceiling with one arm, while pushing people towards Starlight's light with the other. The Deep was doing absolutely nothing useful, but was at least trying. "Clear!" A-Train shouted. "Building's empty." "Then get out!" Maeve commanded, releasing the support beam she'd been holding. The ceiling collapsed around her as she dove for the window, tumbling through open air for 30 floors before catching herself with flight. Behind her, Vought Tower, symbol of corporate superheroism, monument to manufactured heroes, the physical embodiment of everything corrupt about this world's approach to power, collapsed in on itself with a roar of tortured steel and crumbling concrete. Zod watched it fall, his expression unreadable. When the dust began to settle, when the last echoes of destruction faded, when the seven stood battered and exhausted but having saved every single person in that building, Zod descended to street level. He landed in front of Maeve, who stood defiant despite her injuries, despite knowing she couldn't win. "You saved them," Zod observed. "All of them. Impressive coordination under pressure. Perhaps there is more to your heroism than corporate branding after all." "We're not done fighting you," Maeve said, her voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "I know. That's why I'm offering you a different choice." Zod looked past her to the other members of the Seven, to the assembled military forces watching from their perimeter, to the cameras broadcasting this moment worldwide. "Join me, not as subjects, as officers in a new order. You have genuine power, genuine skill, wasted on selling merchandise and taking selfies. Under my command, you could actually save this world instead of just pretending to protect it." "You want us to help you enslave humanity?" Starlight asked, horrified. "I want you to help me govern it," Zod corrected. "There is a difference. Your world is broken. Corporations control heroes. Heroes serve profits instead of people. Crime runs rampant. War continues. Suffering persists. I can fix all of it. But I need enforcers who understand this planet, who can interface with local populations, who have the power to maintain order." He turned specifically to Homelander, who'd been silent through all of this. "You most of all. You want to be a god? I can make you one. Real power, not the illusion Vought sold you. Serve me, enforce my rule, and you'll have authority these humans never gave you. They feared you. Under my governance, they'll worship you. Properly." Homelander's eyes widened. For a moment, just a moment, the temptation was visible on his face. The silence that followed Zod's offer was broken only by the settling debris from Vought Tower's collapse and the distant wail of emergency sirens. Every camera in the world focused on Homelander's face, watching the internal calculation play out behind his eyes. Real power, genuine authority. No more corporate handlers, no more focus groups, no more pretending to care about approval ratings. Just pure, unrestrained godhood under the banner of an actual conqueror who understood strength. "Homelander, don't," Starlight said quietly. "Please, whatever you are, you're not this." "Ain't he, though?" Butcher's voice crackled through the communications channel he'd hacked, broadcasting to every hero's earpiece. "This is what he's always wanted, what Vought trained him to be, a fascist in a cape. Only difference is now he's got permission." Homelander's jaw clenched. His fists trembled. The rage and humiliation of the past day warred with the seductive promise Zod offered. To finally be what he'd always claimed, a god among insects. To punish everyone who'd controlled him, mocked him, feared him. To make them all kneel properly. He opened his mouth to accept. A single gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet, conventional, non-kryptonite, completely inadequate for harming Zod, ricocheted harmlessly off the Kryptonian's shoulder armor. But it broke the moment, shattered the terrible tension. Everyone turned to see Grace Mallory standing 50 yards away, her service weapon raised, smoke curling from the barrel. "No deals with tyrants," she said simply. "No collaboration, no surrender. You want this planet? You'll have to kill every last one of us." Zod's eyes narrowed. "That can be arranged." "Can it, though?" Butcher's voice continued, and now he stepped out from behind a pile of rubble, flanked by Huey, Frenchie, and Kimiko. The boys, humanity's last, best example of people who fought dirty when fighting clean failed. "See, while you've been busy making speeches and burning buildings, we've been doing research, talking to scientists, learning interesting things about Kryptonian biology." "You have no more kryptonite," Zod said dismissively. "I crushed your weapons to dust." "We don't need kryptonite," Dr. Shaw's voice joined the chorus, broadcasting from somewhere safe. "We need time, and you just gave us 90 seconds. 90 seconds of molecular analysis while you burned Vought Tower. 90 seconds of scanning your cellular structure with every sensor we have. 90 seconds to understand exactly how your solar battery biology works." Zod's expression shifted subtly. Not fear, he was incapable of that, but recognition. They'd used his demonstration as a research opportunity. Clever. You absorb yellow sun radiation, Dr. Shaw continued, his voice carrying scientific excitement despite the apocalyptic circumstances. Store it in your cells. Convert it to energy. But storage has limits. You've been using power constantly. Heat vision, flight, super strength. Every use depletes your reserves. And while you recharge quickly under direct sunlight, there's a vulnerable window. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. But it exists. Theoretical weakness, Zod said. Impossible to exploit in combat conditions. Unless we create conditions that force you to spend everything you've got, Butcher replied, grinning like a man who'd just drawn a winning hand. Unless we make you burn through your entire battery all at once, defending against something you can't ignore. He pulled out a detonator. Planted charges throughout Manhattan, Butcher explained conversationally. 57 buildings, hospitals, schools, residential towers, all rigged to blow simultaneously. You can't stop them all, but you'll try, won't you? Because despite being a conquering bastard, you're still military. You've got honor, rules of engagement. You won't let thousands of civilians die when you could prevent it. You're bluffing, Zod said. You would murder your own people to create an opening against me? In a fucking heartbeat, Butcher replied. That's the difference between you and me, General. You're a soldier. I'm a terrorist. You've got principles. I've got nothing left to lose. The standoff crystallized, Zod calculating whether Butcher was serious, whether he'd actually massacre thousands of innocents. Butcher's finger hovering over the detonator, his expression utterly convincing that he'd do exactly what he threatened, the world holding its breath. He's not bluffing, Homelander said suddenly, his voice carrying absolute certainty. I can hear his heartbeat, completely steady, no elevated stress response. He means it. He'll blow the buildings. Zod's eyes narrowed. Then I'll kill him before he triggers the detonator. Can you move faster than radio waves? Huey asked, holding up a secondary trigger. We've got redundant systems. Deadman switches. The charges go off whether you kill Billy or not, unless you agree to leave, right now, forever. The military forces began repositioning, creating firing lanes. The 7 moved into combat stances despite their exhaustion. In bunkers around the world, governments prepared for what came next. And in thousands of broadcast centers, humanity watched 2 men gamble with civilization itself. One alien general who wanted to rule Earth, one British psychopath willing to destroy it rather than let that happen. You realize, Zod said slowly, that if I leave and you detonate those charges anyway, I will return and make this world suffer for your deception. We realize, Mallory confirmed, but we also know you're calculating odds, whether we're serious, whether your honor allows you to call this bluff, whether conquering a world worth ruling requires proving you won't let it burn. Zod looked at Butcher, then at the detonator, then at the city around him. Millions of lives, not soldiers but civilians who had nothing to do with this conflict. In his universe, he'd conquered worlds through military might, but always with strategic purpose. Subjugating populations required those populations to exist. Ruling ashes served no one. Clever, Zod admitted. Use my principles against me. Force me to choose between conquest and massacre. But you've made a critical error in your threat calculus. He moved, not toward Butcher but upward, rocketing into the sky at supersonic speed. Before anyone could react, before Butcher could trigger the detonator, before the military could fire, Zod had vanished into the clouds, his heat vision lancing down not at buildings but at specific points throughout Manhattan. Surgical strikes against something only his enhanced vision could see. The explosions began, but not from buildings collapsing, from charges detonating harmlessly in midair, their destructive force contained and directed upward by precisely timed heat vision that superheated the explosive material's outer casing, causing premature detonation before the charges could damage structures. 57 explosions in 33 seconds. Zod moved faster than sound, faster than thought, his tactical mind processing trajectories and timing with computer precision. Each charge located through X-ray vision, each one neutralized through perfectly calibrated heat vision. The expenditure of energy was enormous, exactly what Butcher wanted. But Zod wasn't defending against the charges to save civilians. He was proving a point. When the last explosion faded, Zod descended slowly, landing in front of Butcher. The Kryptonian was breathing harder now, visibly fatigued for the first time since arriving. His eyes had dimmed slightly. The solar reserves were depleted, exactly as the scientists predicted. "You were correct," Zod said. "I would not let them die. But you were also correct that doing so exhausted my reserves. 30 seconds of vulnerability, perhaps 40. So now we discover whether you have a weapon capable of exploiting it, or whether this was all a desperate bluff from cornered prey." Butcher's grin widened. "You really think I'd bet everything on charges you could see with X-ray vision? That was theater, mate. The real play..." Kimiko moved. She'd been silent throughout the entire confrontation, standing slightly behind the others, dismissed as mute muscle by anyone not paying attention. But the boys knew better. Kimiko was their secret weapon: enhanced strength, regeneration, and most importantly, the willingness to do absolutely anything to protect her family. She closed the distance to Zod in 3 steps, her hand emerging from her jacket holding something that glowed faintly green. Not a blade, not the crushed kryptonite from before. This was new material, fresh from whatever source Butcher had found, shaped into a syringe filled with liquid that pulsed with radioactive light. Liquefied kryptonite, concentrated, weaponized for injection directly into Kryptonian bloodstream. Kimiko stabbed the syringe into Zod's neck with the same casual brutality she'd used on dozens of targets before. The needle punched through weakened Kryptonian skin, vulnerable now that his reserves were depleted, and she pressed the plunger, injecting 20 milliliters of synthetic kryptonite solution directly into his carotid artery. Zod's hand shot up, grabbed Kimiko by the throat, and hurled her 50 feet into a pile of rubble. But the damage was done. The kryptonite was in his bloodstream, spreading with every heartbeat, attacking his cellular structure from the inside. Pain, real, genuine, debilitating pain radiated through Zod's body. His vision blurred, his strength faltered. He stumbled, falling to one knee, his hand clutching at his neck where the injection site burned like molten metal. The invulnerable warrior who'd tanked missiles and military assaults was brought low by a mute woman and a syringe. "Now!" Mallory screamed into her radio. "Hit him with everything!" The military opened fire. Not conventional weapons this time, but everything experimental, everything desperate, everything they'd held in reserve. Directed energy weapons that superheated the air, experimental railguns firing depleted uranium rounds at hypersonic velocities, chemical weapons designed to disrupt cellular function. And in the sky above, stealth bombers released their payload, not nuclear warheads but thermobaric weapons specifically engineered to consume oxygen over a massive radius. The Seven joined the assault, Homelander's heat vision, weakened by his earlier fight but still deadly. Starlight channeling every amp of electricity from Manhattan's dying power grid. A-Train creating sonic booms by running circles around Zod's kneeling form. Even Maeve, with her broken hand and battered body, grabbed a steel support beam and swung it like a baseball bat into Zod's skull. And through it all, Zod endured. The kryptonite was killing him. He could feel his cells degrading, his solar reserves unable to compensate for the radioactive poison coursing through his veins. But he was still Kryptonian, still a warrior who'd survived wars these humans couldn't imagine. He pushed himself to his feet despite the pain, despite the weapons striking him from every angle, despite the world itself trying to kill him. His eyes blazed red one final time. "If I die," Zod said, his voice strained but unwavering, "this city dies with me." His heat vision erupted not in controlled beams, but in an omnidirectional burst. Thermal energy released in every direction simultaneously. A desperate final attack from a dying warrior who refused to fall alone. The heat was apocalyptic, melting asphalt, igniting buildings, turning the air itself into plasma. Homelander threw himself in front of civilians, tanking the heat vision with his own body. Maeve grabbed Starlight and covered her with her own armored form. A-Train ran through the blast zone, pulling people to safety even as his costume ignited. And Kimiko, battered and broken, crawled toward Frenchie's position, determined to die beside someone she loved if this was truly the end. The explosion of heat lasted 5 seconds. An eternity of burning agony. Then it stopped. Zod collapsed face first onto the scorched earth, the kryptonite finally overwhelming even Kryptonian biology. His breathing was shallow, ragged. Blood, red and very human-looking, pooled beneath him. For the first time since arriving in this universe, General Zod was defeated. Butcher walked forward slowly, pulling a pistol from his coat. Not kryptonite-enhanced, just a regular gun. Because Zod was vulnerable now, mortal, and bullets would do just fine. "Wait," Starlight said, grabbing Butcher's arm. "If we execute him like this, we're no better than—" "I'm already worse than him, love," Butcher interrupted. "Always have been. That's why I'm the one who does this." He aimed the pistol at Zod's head. Butcher's finger tightened on the trigger. One bullet, one dead Kryptonian, one less tyrant trying to enslave humanity. Simple math. "Billy, don't," Huey's voice, quiet but firm. "Please. Give me one good reason," Butcher said, not lowering the weapon. "Because we're not executioners," Huey replied. "Because if we kill him like this, helpless, defeated, dying, we prove him right. That we're savages who only understand violence. That we need someone like him to control us. He ain't wrong though, is he?" Butcher's voice carried the weight of years fighting monsters in human skin. "We are savages. We do need controlling. Difference is, I'd rather we control ourselves than kneel to some alien bastard with delusions of godhood." Zod coughed, blood speckling the scorched concrete. His enhanced hearing still functioned enough to catch the conversation, his tactical mind still processing despite the kryptonite eating through his cells. "Kill me or don't," he rasped, "but make the choice quickly. This poison will finish the job in minutes regardless." Dr. Shaw's voice crackled over the communication network. "He's right. The liquefied kryptonite is breaking down his cellular structure. Without immediate medical intervention using technology we don't possess, he's dead anyway. The only question is whether we watch him suffer or end it mercifully." "Mercy," Butcher spat, "for a conqueror who was gonna enslave billions? Yeah, that sounds reasonable." "It's not about him," Starlight said, her voice carrying across the devastated square. "It's about us. About what kind of people we choose to be when we win. He offered Homelander power and authority. Homelander almost took it. Why? Because deep down he's just like Zod. Someone who thinks might makes right, that the strong should rule the weak." She looked at Homelander, who stood silent among the ruins, his costume scorched, his perfect face bloodied. "But we're not like that. We can't be. Because the moment we decide that killing helpless enemies is acceptable, we become the monsters we're fighting." Homelander met her gaze, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. For once, he had no sarcastic response, no narcissistic deflection. He'd been seconds away from accepting Zod's offer, from becoming everything Starlight just described, and everyone knew it. "So what then?" MM asked. "We let him die slow?" "That ain't mercy either. We save him," a new voice said. Everyone turned to see Stan Edgar emerging from the crowd of emergency personnel, his suit somehow still immaculate, despite the apocalypse around him. He walked calmly towards Zod's dying form, regarding the Kryptonian with the analytical detachment of a businessman assessing an asset. "You've lost your fucking mind," Butcher said. "Save him so he can recover and finish enslaving us?" "Save him so we can study him," Edgar corrected. "General Zod represents technology and biology centuries beyond our current understanding. His knowledge of conquest, governance, and military strategy could revolutionize our approach to global security. His Kryptonian physiology could unlock breakthroughs in medicine, energy production, and space exploration. He's a person, not a research subject," Starlight protested. "He's a weapon," Edgar countered. "One that was pointed at humanity. Now we have the opportunity to aim it elsewhere. The question is whether we're smart enough to take it." Zod laughed, a wet pain sound. "You think you can contain me? Control me? I've escaped prisons built by civilizations that mastered dimensional engineering while your species was discovering fire." "Perhaps," Edgar agreed, "but you're also a military strategist, a pragmatist. You understand when a battle is lost and when retreat is the only viable option. So I'll make you the same offer you made us. Surrender, and we discuss terms. Or die here, having accomplished nothing except proving that humans are more resourceful than you credited. The silence stretched. Zod's breathing became more labored. The kryptonite was winning. Seconds remained, maybe a minute at most. The choice was dying as a failed conqueror or living as a captive research subject. Neither option held honor, but one held possibility. You would need to neutralize the kryptonite poisoning, Zod said finally, his voice barely a whisper. Flush it from my system. I don't know if your medical technology is sufficient. We don't either, Dr. Shaw admitted, but we're willing to try, if you cooperate. Cooperation meaning submission, Zod clarified. Imprisonment, study, interrogation. Cooperation meaning survival, Edgar corrected. You wanted to govern this world. Instead, you'll help us govern ourselves. Your knowledge, our implementation, a consultant rather than a conqueror. This is insane, Mallory interjected. You're actually negotiating with him after everything. After everything, he's still the most powerful being on this planet, Edgar interrupted. Dead, he's a cautionary tale. Alive and cooperative, he's an asset. I prefer assets to tales. Butcher's gun remains steady, aimed at Zod's head. And if he don't cooperate, if he recovers and decides to finish what he started, then we inject more kryptonite, Edgar said simply. We've proven we can hurt him, kill him. He knows that now. The power dynamic has shifted. Zod's eyes, still faintly glowing despite the poison, locked onto Butcher's. You want to kill me? I can see it. Not for justice, not for security. You simply hate powerful beings and want them dead. We're more alike than you wish to admit. We ain't nothing alike, Butcher snarled. Aren't we? You terrorize those stronger than you through cunning and brutality. I conquer through strength and strategy. Different methods, same outcome. Powerful beings humbled by those willing to fight dirty. The difference is, I'm honest about what I am. Butcher's hand trembled. One pull, one bullet. End this forever. But Huey's words echoed. We're not executioners. And starlights. What kind of people we choose to be when we win. Fuck, Butcher said, lowering the gun. Fuck. He turned to Edgar. You save him, you contain him, and if he so much as sneezes wrong, I get first shot at putting him down permanent. Deal? Acceptable, Edgar agreed, already signaling for medical teams. Vaught's Emergency Medical Division, the same teams that patched up Soups after disastrous operations, descended on Zod with equipment designed for enhanced physiology. They established IV lines to flush his system, administered experimental chelating agents designed to bind with radioactive materials, and stabilized his rapidly degrading cellular structure. It was desperate, improvised medicine based on incomplete understanding of alien biology. But it worked. Barely. Zod's breathing stabilized. The blood flow slowed. His eyes dimmed to normal as his body entered a medically induced coma to conserve what little energy remained. Within 20 minutes, he was loaded into a heavily armored medical transport, bound in restraints designed to hold Homelander, surrounded by guards carrying kryptonite-tipped weapons, and en route to a facility so classified even most Pentagon officials didn't know it existed. The world watched a tyrant become a prisoner. In the aftermath, Manhattan burned. Vought Tower was rubble. Times Square looked like a war zone. Casualty estimates were climbing, not from Zod's direct actions, but from the battle's collateral damage. Buildings collapsed in the fighting, people crushed in panicked evacuations. The economic impact alone would take years to calculate, but humanity had survived, battered, broken, but unbowed. The Seven stood among the ruins, each processing what had happened differently. Homelander stared at his hands, still seeing the moment he'd almost accepted Zod's offer, almost become the monster everyone feared. Maeve cradled her broken hand, wondering if her suicide mission had actually mattered or if she'd just delayed the inevitable. Starlight looked at the devastation and questioned whether saving one alien's life was heroism or stupidity. A-Train collapsed from exhaustion, his metabolism finally catching up to the impossible speeds he'd maintained. The Deep wondered why he was even there. We won, Huey said quietly, standing beside Butcher in the ruins. Did we? Butcher replied. We got him locked up. For now. But Edgar's gonna study him, learn from him, probably try to weaponize whatever makes him tick. And somewhere down the line, some corporate cunt or government spook is gonna think they can control him. Use him, and then we'll be right back here, fighting the same battle. Maybe, Huey admitted, but today we proved we can fight it, and win, even against someone infinitely stronger. That has to count for something. Butcher looked at the kid he'd dragged into this life of violence and moral compromise. Huey still had hope. Still believed they could make things better instead of just less worse. Maybe that's what separated them from Zod. Not power, but hope. Yeah, Butcher said finally, maybe it does. Across the city, in temporary command centers and emergency bunkers, world leaders breathed sighs of relief. The immediate threat was contained, but the questions remained. What now? How do you govern a world that just learned it was one alien's whim away from enslavement? How do you maintain social order when corporate heroes proved inadequate and only desperate terrorism saved the day? Stan Edgar sat in his temporary office. Vault Tower was gone, but the corporation persisted, reviewing footage of the battle. Zod's combat efficiency, his tactical brilliance, his principles and honor. All of it data, all of it potentially useful. Vought had built an empire on manufactured heroes. Imagine what they could do with an actual god in custody. His phone rang, encrypted line, presidential seal. Mr. Edgar, the president's voice carried exhaustion and authority in equal measure. That thing you proposed, studying Zod, extracting his knowledge, I'm authorizing it under the strictest possible oversight. But understand, if he escapes, if this backfires, history will remember this as the day we doomed ourselves. History remembers winners, Mr. President, Edgar replied. And we just won. Let's ensure we learn enough from our enemy that the next time something like him appears, we're ready. The call ended. Edgar pulled up another screen. Black site locations, research proposals, containment protocols. General Zod had arrived seeking to rule. Instead, he'd become humanity's most valuable prisoner. The war was over, but the consequences were just beginning. In a bunker 300 feet underground, surrounded by lead-lined walls and kryptonite-infused containment fields, General Drusad lay unconscious, his chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. Monitors tracked his vital signs. Cameras recorded every breath. Scientists analyzed every cellular sample. And somewhere in his chemically suppressed consciousness, Zod dreamed of Krypton, of his universe, of the Justice League and Superman, and battles fought with honor against worthy opponents. He'd crashed into a universe of frauds and corporate puppets, expecting easy conquest. Instead, he'd found humans who fought dirty, thought creatively, and refused to kneel even when outmatched by godlike power. They'd poisoned him, outsmarted him, beaten him through cunning rather than strength. Respectable. Perhaps when he recovered, when his cellular structure rebuilt itself, when the opportunity inevitably came to escape, or bargain or leverage his knowledge for freedom, perhaps this universe deserved a different approach than conquest. Perhaps these flawed, desperate, resourceful humans could be guided rather than ruled, taught rather than subjugated. Or perhaps he would simply kill them all for their impudence and start again with a population more amenable to Kryptonian governance. Time would tell, and Zod had nothing but time now, trapped in this prison they'd built, biding his strength, planning his next move. The game wasn't over. The board had simply reset. Above ground, the sun rose on a changed world, one where humanity knew it wasn't alone in the universe, where corporate heroes had been exposed as inadequate, where the line between savior and tyrant proved thinner than anyone wanted to admit. The boys' universe had survived its collision with the DC Universe's greatest military mind, but at what cost and for how long remained to be seen. The world would rebuild. It always did. Manhattan's scars would heal over months and years, though the crater in Times Square, where General Zod first landed, remained untouched. Some wanted it as a memorial, others as a warning. Vought announced plans to construct a new headquarters with unprecedented safety features and enhanced structural integrity. Corporate speak for admitting their symbol of power had proven woefully inadequate when faced with actual power. The Seven became something different in the aftermath. Not quite heroes, not quite the corporate mascots they'd been before. Homelander underwent psychological evaluation, voluntary, shockingly, wrestling with how close he'd come to embracing tyranny. Maeve started actually training again, treating heroism as a profession rather than a performance. Starlight became the voice calling for transparency and accountability, demanding that if humanity was going to survive threats like Zod, it needed real heroes, not manufactured ones. The boys continued their work, though the dynamic had shifted. They'd saved the world through terrorism and brutality, proving Butcher's philosophy that sometimes monsters were needed to fight monsters. But Huey's question lingered. At what point did fighting monsters make you monstrous? And in his underground prison, General Zod waited, patient, calculating, studying his captors as much as they studied him. He'd underestimated one universe of humans. He wouldn't make that mistake twice. The story of what happened when a Kryptonian general entered the boys' universe would echo through both worlds. A cautionary tale about power unchecked, hope tested, and the razor's edge between salvation and damnation. Humanity had faced a god and survived. But gods, as Zod knew better than anyone, were remarkably difficult to keep imprisoned forever. Somewhere in the multiverse, the dimensional barriers remained unstable. Other beings might cross. Other threats might emerge. Other questions about power and justice and the cost of survival would demand answers. But for now, on this day, in this universe, humanity could claim victory. Imperfect, costly, and temporary as it might be, the sun still rose, people still lived, and hope, battered but unbroken, persisted in the darkness that had threatened to consume everything.